Friday. So we are here to talk about IDA Part B, 611, 619, and Part C. Here's a little bit about who we serve and our wonderful state of Oregon. There's a message from Dr. Williams there on the left, and a little bit about our demographics here in this graphic in the middle. I'll pause here and let folks kind of digest this. Dr. Williams is amazing. If you've gotten a chance to see her speak in person, it's really awesome, or even virtually. A lot of energy, great vision, very, very awesome individual to be leading ODE. Here's a little bit more about our demographics. Again, kind of diving into the details. And our equity statement. We present this at all of our presentations. Depending on the lens in which you read this through, we believe that this is the way that ODE is presenting ourselves to the world and to our children learning in our communities. And this is a little bit about us in our department. Up here at the top, we have Oregon Department of Education, and we have Office of Enhancing Student Opportunities. And we, who just all did our introductions, we sit in the resource management and operations team. So we're bridging the gap between program, contract managers, and other fiscal departments. And we are trying to provide technical assistance when possible to our LEAs. And I'll pass up to Thea.
So just a quick start here for what is IDA. So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is a piece of legislation from the 1970s. It's last reauthorized in 2004. We always hope that they will reauthorize it again soon. Just hasn't happened, in a long time. And IDA is legislation that provides funding for special education services. And there are program requirements and funding, fiscal requirements for it. And this is funding for special education that goes beyond what state and local dollars can provide. The way that IDEA works here is that it's a reimbursement grant. So we put the money in your EGANS account, you guys submit claims, and we approve those so you can get reimbursed. It's also a grant that runs on a 27-month cycle. So you get your award, it's forward funded starting July. The actual award comes in October, and then you have 24 months to spend that award. So this is a graphic that is the IDA Part B subgrants formula. So for Part B, this top part here, the state grant, that is the award that goes to our whole state. It's separate for 611 and 619 and Part C. A portion of this state award goes to the state set aside. So that is the administration piece, which is the staffing typically that is required in order to implement this program. And then other state level activities are other contracts and services that the state provides for students. And the money that is designated for the state set aside, that's a total that's given to us from the federal government. The rest of the money is subgrants that go to LEAs. From that portion of money from the subgrants, there's a specific piece that is base payments. So this is money that districts get every year. It is a complicated formula that is based on the number of students in your district in 1997. And then there are some adjustments that are made. There are some districts that if they opened and they had 0 students, they had no base payment. And so it's a complicated formula that is all written in statute if you are ever interested in looking that up. But then beyond the base payments, then we have the remaining funds. And that is split up into this 85-15. 85% of that money is dispersed based on the population of our districts. And 15% of that is dispersed based on the amount of students who are living in poverty. And so Just a little note about that is, students that are living in poverty, they get their amount from the 85% and then an additional amount from that 15%. So I feel like we maybe missed a slide, but no, it's fine. It'll come back. So for the state withholding process, there are some state programs that are partially funded with IDA dollars from our set aside, like we showed earlier, and then some that are partially funded with LEA flow through portion. So that would be that second half of the chart. So for these programs, LEAs have the option to have the state withhold part of that award in order to provide services through these programs. And the amount that is withheld by the state for those programs is proportional to the number of students receiving those services. If you as the LEA elect to retain your funds that would go toward that program, then you'll be responsible for providing those services as well. So that includes our regional inclusive services, school for the deaf, EICSE, and long-term care and treatment. So if you, for example, have one student in LTCT, there's a specific amount of money that is tied to that student's long-term care and treatment. If you have the state withhold that, then we put that money into the program and we provide the services for that student. If you withhold that money, then you are able to spend it and you are then responsible for all of the services for that student. So for 611, 619, Part C, those are three separate parts of IDEA. So for Part B, you have 611 and 619, and your uses are going to be the same for that. There's a decision tree we have, I think, at the end of this presentation, and if you've been to any of our trainings, it shows up pretty much every time. And the Part C dollars are not dispersed to LEAs as flow-throughs. Those dollars are spent on services, and those are provided through contracts and grants. A lot through your ESD, they provide those services that come from those Part C dollars. And so, a big difference in these pieces is the age of students that are served. So 611, that is for all of your students ages 3 to 21. Part B 619 is specific to students ages 3 to 5, or students that are under 6. It's sometimes called the preschool grant, but there are sometimes 5-year-olds in kindergarten. So just keeping in mind that if you have a 5-year-old who is in your elementary rather than a pre-K, that they are still eligible then for those 619 funds. And then Part C serves birth to 2, so up until that 3rd birthday, children and families are served with those dollars.
Eligibility and compliance. Eligibility must budget at least the same amount of state and local dollars than were expended in the last year in order to meet MOE. Also must be providing FAPE. Compliance is must meet excess costs. We just last week or a couple weeks ago did a training on excess cost. Must also meet MOE as a requirement. And then significant disproportionality. This is a program requirement with fiscal implications. If an LEA has been identified as SIGDIS, we have to set aside funds for comprehensive coordinated early intervening services. So a nice fun long acronym there for you. Using CEIS or CCEIS, LEAs can reserve up to 15% of their total IDA Part B award for coordinated early intervening services, whereas for CCEIS, they must reserve exactly 15% of their IDA award to support those significantly disproportionate group. Funds used for students that are not identified for special education but exceed the need for extra support in order to be successful. Funds must be tracked separately. The area of responsibility is 340. Examples, professional development, technology in classrooms, certifications, general ed teachers certifications for special ed, materials and supplies, and evidence-based programs and assessments. Tracking dollars. 611 and 619 must be tracked separately. These can be accounted for proportionally if multiple funds are being used by time or by child count. Here's an example here below. A speech language pathologist, my goodness, I might need one of those, provides services for 3 to 5-year-olds or 3 to 21-year-olds, cannot be fully funded by 619, but could be fully funded by 611. 25% of the students are 3 to 5, 25% of the cost can be paid with 619, or 10% of the time with 3 to 5, and 10% of the total cost can be paid with 619. So again, trying to show some areas where you can leverage the funds differently, but also making sure that you're staying within the requirements. Continue tracking. State and local dollars for MOE, CCEIS, and CEIS. And the LEA must track funds used for parentally placed private school children, not entitled to individual services, but equitable services, entitled to IDA dollars per pupil amount. And decisions using these dollars must be in conference with parent, private school, and LEA representatives. Here's the allowable uses decision tree we mentioned earlier in the presentation. We tried to hand this out whenever someone is asking us if there's an allowable use. We ask them to go through this decision tree and kind of walk themselves through to make sure they're making the best decision for their LEA. And here are some examples. I'm not going to read through all the examples, but this is a great reference for kind of a more broad use of your funds should you be looking for some examples. So salaries, professional development, materials and supplies, travel and workshops. Reporting requirements for LEAs. These would be items that are submitted back to ODE. So for the most important one is the application for IDA Part B funds. Within this application, there are the FAPE assurances and equity assurances that are required for IDA. The SECC child count reporting, also a requirement for IDA. Excess costs, which we covered a couple weeks ago. And then budget and expenditures must be submitted to our school finance team, which we work with interdepartmentally to make sure that those are submitted properly. Along with reporting requirements, our policy and procedure requirements. A lot of these have come up during our monitoring visits, and it is quite often that schools have a practice in place, but there is not a policy and procedure written down. So it's really important to make sure that you have policies and procedures in place around all these topics: time and effort, inventory management, record retention, separation of duties, and conflict of interest. These are all very important to make sure that you have policies in place in order to make sure that you're compliant with the IDEA regulations. And I will stop the recording.